Is your mouth watering for some tender, tasty smoked brisket? Well, go get one of these and start up one of these, and I'll show you how. The first element of a great smoked brisket is a great rub. Either make one of your own or buy a good quality one. I like it a little spicy, but you pick the one that you like. Cover both sides of the brisket with a good heavy coating of the rub. And don't forget about the edges. Put the rub on the night before you smoke. Cover it loosely with foil and refrigerate overnight. The second element in a smoked brisket is the smoke. It doesn't matter what type of smoker you use. Just make sure that you get a good amount of smoke into the meat using a low and slow method. Get the smoker going and place the meat away from the heat source. Then try to regulate it between 225 and 250 degrees for about 5 hours. Before I pull the brisket off the smoker, I set up a large pan, line it with foil, and put a small rack in there to hold it up off the bottom so that it doesn't sit right in the fat as it melts off. The last two elements of cooking the brisket are very important for your brisket to be tender. It's the final cooking and the cutting. Covering it with foil and cooking it in the oven for 3 to 5 hours on 300 degrees instead of finishing on the smoker makes it more tender and not chewy. After 3 to 4 hours in the oven, I always take a look at it to see if it's tender enough. Just stick a fork right in the center and twist it just a little. You don't want to tear the fibers of the meat. You just want to check it and see if it looks tender, and that is going to be so tender. So we're done. Now, if you want to serve this tomorrow instead, then just leave it out with the foil on top, let it cool for about an hour, then put it in the fridge. You can reheat it tomorrow or get it ready for freezing. Now, the brisket has been in the refrigerator overnight. I'm going to freeze it, so I'm going to cut it into chunks. Before you cut it, you need to know which way the grain of the meat goes. In this, if you can see, the grain goes this direction, and so we're going to want to cut across the grain like this so that you have nice tender meat. Now look at this meat. Got a good smoke ring, and it's very, very tender. Make sure to cut your brisket very thin. The thinner, the more tender it's going to be. Now you can see this is falling apart. Let me show you a little more about the grain. Okay, this was not cut against the grain. See these long fibers? If you were to try to eat that, you'd chew on it, it'd be pretty tough, right? Okay, so if you cut long ways like this, you're going to have a bunch of stringy, tough meat. That's why you cut thin slices. You cut them against the grain. See, the fibers are going this direction, so you cut across this way, and then you have really tender meat. Those fibers are very short because you've cut across them. I freeze cooked and smoked meats in vacuum seal bags. This way the air doesn't get to it and they'll last up to a year. If you don't have a vacuum sealer, wrap your meat tightly in plastic wrap and then again in foil. After you wrap it in that, you're going to put it in a zip top bag, labeled, put it in the freezer, and it'll last about 3 months. See you next time on Kimberly in the Kitchen.